too good. I mean, this is all really fascinating.
Take that lanyard off so you can see my
Yeah, I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Torso at a double feature on the Deuce in, 76, 75, something like that. And, I just remember, walking out of there feeling like I'd been dragged behind a truck for about 50 miles, just beat to death.
No shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I had some priceless experiences there. The first double bill that I caught. Yeah, first double bill I caught on the Deuce, I think was I had just moved to the city. American Werewolf in London had just come out, and I had seen it twice in the theater in York, Pennsylvania. But then I got to see it on Times Square. I'm trying to remember what it was paired with, but I would see shit like Chud and Children of the Corn teamed up together, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm very excited about Children of the Corn, but Chud looks like a piece of shit. And then I go and it's like Chud was great.
I love Chud.
Chud was great, and Children of the Corn was like,
Joe Bob was really down on Chud, and I'm like, I love Chud, and he's like, why? And I'm like, because it's New York in that time, Soho looked like that. You did never see that again. That was empty, and he's like, that's why you like the go. I was like,
yeah, well, I mean, if you have nostalgia, it totally tickles the nostalgia gland. But while it was happening, in pre-nostalgia, which was the moment, what was amazing was just I'm here. I mean, I go see Basket Case, and I delivered a package in the building where Basket Case is shot. So
isn't that Bowery Hotel? The St. Mark's Hotel.
It's not the St. Mark's, but it's and again, because parts of Basket Case take place on the actual Deuce, where he's walking down the street and you see him go upstairs and stuff like that, as I recall. Just watching shit like that. And I told the story about the day I'm walking down 42nd, and I see this garish yellow marquee that said "Banned in 13 countries, the most disgusting film ever made," or whatever it was. Make them die slowly. So I crossed the street to look at this shit because make them die slowly. What the fuck is that? And there are all these black and white photographs on the windows outside to lure us in, and they were pictures of people with the tops of their heads torn off, and people pulling their brains out. And amongst the things was a woman who was about to be a man called Horst, where they stick the hooks into your pectorals and hoist you up. And so we could see the hooks. We could actually see the holes in her boobs where the hooks were ostensibly dug through, but they had little pieces of tape over the nipples because God knows that we couldn't see nipples. So, because that would be wrong. And I'm standing there looking at this shit, and then I look over and there's this 12-year-old black kid standing next to me looking at the pictures too. And I said, "You getting all this?" And he said, "Uh-huh." So, yeah, I love New York.
Yeah,
it was great.
How long were you living there? What was the period when you were living there?
I was there from 81 until 88, 89, somewhere in there.
Because your stories at the time, totally, you were hanging out at CBGBs, you were hanging at Max's, you were you were a Mud Club, you were part of that scene, totally, right?
I would go to those places, but I didn't hang because I would be on the street all day. I was doing 20 miles a day on foot as a street messenger, just hustling up and down in the streets. But I was memorizing the town. I was memorizing everything. I'd just be walking down the street got it. In my fucking biker boots, my Larry Storch biker boots, and then at night I would go home and write. So I wasn't big party scene, but when I went, those were the places I went. And that was the shit I saw. And so, it was cool.
Because it felt like you were writing like you were there. So
I was. I was so there. I was so there. And also really high. So I was seeing everything.
It was such a good time in New York. I missed that so much.
Oh, it was great.
I mean,
it was great.
It was just anarchy. It was wonderful.
Yeah. So.
And it was funny on the panel today. You guys were talking about once they said hippies, the movement was over, and similar to punk. Once they named it punk, then it was because you go from the Velvet Underground and then, Richard Hell and all these things, were happening and Blondie, and they were all different kinds of bands. None of them were like, but then once it was punk, suddenly everyone sounded the same and everyone was...
Yeah. 'Cause then you get not the crazy fuckers that originated the thing, that pulled it out of thin air, but all the people who go, hey, look, let's go do that. And yeah, then the next thing you know, everybody's doing it. And no, it's so funny to now live in the 21st century where wild hair and black t-shirts don't necessarily tell you who the person is. I mean, that was the uniform in much the same way that hair down to here and tie-dyed shit was, love beads were the hippie paraphernalia of that time. I was living in Argentina in the 60s. I moved back to the States when the military overthrew the Argentine government. This is a story. You want to hear this story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fuck
So,
yeah. Are you good?
Mm-hmm.
Are you comfortable?
Oh, fine, yeah.
So I'm living in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I was going to La Colegio Lincoln, which was the school for American kids and rich Argentines and basically anybody who was part of the military-industrial complex, corporate military-industrial complex. And so I'm going to the nice school, and I saw my first people die when I was 8 on the streets, in front of me, and saw, the traffic cops carried machine guns, and just...
Family was in the military, I'm guessing?
My dad was actually in the State Department, but I was surrounded by those kinds of people. I lived in a nice house with bars on the windows, but I played soccer or football with the local Argentinos in the vacant lot across the street. So I learned Spanish faster than anybody else in my family because I was hanging with the people on the streets. But I would walk to school, and there would be this car parked in front of a bodega between my house and the train station. A couple of guys had decided that robbing a bank was a really good idea. It didn't turn out very well. They got totally Bonnie and Clyded. Swiss cheesed. This car had easily 1,000 holes in it, and it was left on the curb for months so that people would go, don't rob a bank or we'll fucking kill you. And I would walk by every day, and I would look through a different bullet hole and go, okay, so that's where that bullet hit the upholstery, which is why that blood splash went there. And so I was forensic pathologizing from a very early age. And anyway, watching the military police beat Chilean immigrants right outside of our school, and I learned a healthy disrespect for authority very early on. But then one day, I had just left school, and there was a birthday party for one of my friends at a house a couple blocks from the school, so we were all going over there. As I recall, Santana, the first Santana album was playing on the stereo when the phone call came, and it was my dad who never called, and he says, you have to come home right now. I said, we haven't opened the presents. He said, you have to come home right now. Grumble, hang up the phone. Sorry, you guys, I gotta go. I'll see you all tomorrow. Got on the commuter train to go down to downtown Buenos Aires. I get off. We pull into the big station downtown, and everybody is running and screaming. Okay, I get out of the train, and I go outside, and I see tanks, armored tanks, rolling down the boulevard, flanked by men with submachine guns, all coming toward me. Fortunately, my house was the other direction, so I'm running with the crowd in the direction of my house being driven by the tanks and the machine guns. But I wasn't especially scared. I was like, this is nuts, I get to my house, my apartment. It was an apartment in downtown. Take the elevator up, get into my apartment. My apartment is empty. There's not a stick of furniture. There's nothing hanging on the walls. It's a bare, empty-ass place. It was full this morning when I left. Now it's bare-ass empty. I walk through the living room. It was a railroad apartment, so it's a big living room and then a long corridor with kitchen and then bathroom and then the bedrooms down at the far end. And I look down the hallway, everything's gone, and I see a couple of shadows moving on the back wall and a couple of guys speaking Spanish, and then I hear my dad, and I go down the hall, and I get to my bedroom, and there's one box. It was the only thing left in the place. It was one box of my creepy and eerie and Vampirella magazines, and my dad says, you can take one. And so I took, I think, the latest issue of Eerie. We took the back elevator to a garage where a sedan with blackout windows was waiting for us. They took us to La Boca, the mouth of the river between the Rio de la Plata, separating Argentina from Uruguay. And we took a ferry boat across. All our shit went into storage. It was promptly burned to the ground, so we lost everything. And I fled the country, and that was it. And right after that began the Desaparecidos, where people were disappearing and disappearing and disappearing. Cops would come at night. You would never see those people again until 30 years later when they were found with 10,000 other people in a body dump. And that was just, so just whew, got out of there, came back to the States, and anti-war protests were going on against the Vietnam War, and Key Bridge between Arlington and DC was lined with National Guardsmen with guns, and I'm like, what is the fucking difference? And so, again, healthy disrespect for authority immediately locked down right there. Now, why did I go into this story? What did you ask me?
I don't know, but it was a great story.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating, but that I can see so much of like what that experience brings to your work, and the voice, and that whole apocalyptic. You lived it.
I saw a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still seeing shit.
Yeah. Well, we're all seeing shit now.
Right.
And it's all out now. It was always there, but now it's all like really out. So I'm kind of hoping, because it's out now, that we'll finally change it.
Yes.
But but it's always been there. But people just were like, oh no, we're not racist anymore. Like,
right?
Fuck. What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah. The shit has officially met the fan. They're shaking hands at this point. So no, this is a very, very interesting time. Of course, a very good time for horror, because horror is the fiction of worst case scenarios, and we're in one now. So no, I'm very optimistic about the human race, but I've been wrong before. So we'll see how it goes. I'm rooting for us, though.
Yeah, I have hopes. There are good people who are doing good stuff, but,
absolutely.
But it still astounds me at how many fucked up assholes there are doing bad shit, and so willing to just completely, fuck everyone.
It's so bald-faced. It really is. It's like they finally took the mask off. They're not admitting the mask is off, but the mask is off.
It's like the 70s and 80s. It's the same, like the Reagan era. It feels very similar, except now it's all out, instead of like this kindly grandfather who's like lying to you about what,
Oh yeah.
All the authoritarian rule and everything. Now it's just like, this fucking asshole.
It feels more like the 60s to me. The sheer level of upheaval, because the weird thing about the 80s, in my experience, was that as Reagan helped clamp down normalcy and trickle down, economics became the order of the day, and we started stomping on the actual classes that we had just spent a decade and a half trying to free or balance. Punk erupted, and all the things that erupted out of the 80s that were cool were a direct response to the Squeeze. But there was something about the 60s when everything was really blowing open, and the civil rights movement was really coming together, and fucking women's rights, and the first glimmer of gay rights, and everything. Yeah, it was all possibility, and psychedelic drugs opening our heads, and just so much that was going on. The spirit of revolution and optimism and hope that got completely stomped into the fucking ground right about the time that we started shooting students at Kent State, and everybody went, hey, we could protest the war, or we could just play some hacky sack. That might be fun, and maybe we could get it. Maybe my dad will still give me a job at the bank or something, and I'll so we still had the sex and the drugs, but none of it meant anything. And your long hair didn't mean shit anymore. Executives were growing their ponytails and becoming gross, and it was all just fucked up. So this particular time, I'm really glad I've lived long enough to see how this is riding out, and I would like to help. I'm wildly optimistic. I just, when you look at shit like the El Paso shootings and how a largely apolitical portion of populace, like a town that was not a wildly politically engaged town, is all of a sudden, shit, they're trying to kill us, and they're all going to vote this time, and they're not going to be voting for the motherfuckers that want them in cages. If that can play, if that can totally really play, and more people of color and more people who were so disenfranchised by the system that they just gave up on the system entirely go, no, this time we're going to go in, it could get very interesting. I'm psyched. And
apathy is no longer an option.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you do it, you know what you're doing. So, wild times.
So, do you want to talk about Joe Lansdale?
I fucking love Joe Lansdale. It's really interesting. It was so fun to just do this panel with him.
You guys just were ripping. You guys were hilarious.
It's funny. Yeah, Joe and I could have talked for another 3 hours. It would have been easy. I just felt really bad for Beth and Lee, just sitting there going. They were like stuck in the middle of a game of Pong or something. Where so we'd go a lot faster than that.
Well, you both had a very strong personality, very strong opinions, so it was just kind of like, but it was really entertaining.
And I mean, so Joe and I started publishing in Twilight Zone magazine at roughly the same time, early on in the days of Twilight Zone, and so yeah, we were page buddies, but we'd never met. We weren't anywhere close or anything, and it really, honestly, it was the anthologies that he was starting to appear in. When I saw like Down by the Sea by the Great Big Rock, or Tight Little Stitches on a Dead Man's Back, all of a sudden those were the stories that were like, wait a minute, you're not just pretty good, you're really good. And then he did Night They Missed the Horror Show for Silver Screen, and it was like, wait, you just went from, yeah, you're pretty good, to, you're the fucking best, man. How did this happen? And it was sheer hard work, and I mean, he worked so hard, and he still works that hard, and he's amazing. And again, just this uncompromising, I'm going to say whatever the fuck I want, sort of writer. And so yeah, I've been proud of him the whole way through. I'm proud of him now. He's a force in nature. He's a great soul and just beautiful fucking guy. I got nothing bad to say about Joe. Not a single thing. You want to ask me anything?
So your page buddies, when was the first time you guys actually met?
I think the first time we actually met must have been a World Fantasy Convention. I'm not sure which one it was. I'm tempted to say that it was the one where The Light at the End, which was our first book, which was about to go and sell 1 million copies and be all fancy and stuff, and I didn't have to be a street messenger anymore. They were giving away advance copies, and it was also the weekend that Clive Barker came to the States for the first time to promote his Books of Blood. So we were like the young, crazy kids there, but every woman at the convention wanted to make out with Clive Barker.
They were the wrong sex, I think.
Yeah, and then that was when they found out he was gay. I was sitting in a room with a bunch of publishing women, and they were all so bummed because Clive was gay, and I said, well, at least I have a shot. And they gave me the fucking dagger eyes of death. It was just like we're not hurting enough, and now you have to say that.
It was really like into. I remember he was really into like the whole, the what used to be the meatpacking district. Then the whole, really S&M scene. So like I know he went to some of the hardcore S&M bars there. So like, that's not your thing.
No, S&M is not my thing, but I find the culture fascinating, and yeah, I mean, so much was blowing up in New York in the underground at that time. It was so fascinating, and yeah, the meatpacking district was intense. Past the actual slaughterhouse meatpacking smell to
What's the name of the? I forgot the name of the bar. It's like.
Oh, wait a minute! Yeah.
It wasn't. Yeah, I can't get it, but yeah, there was. I remember. Yeah, there was some really dark shit going on.
Really dark shit going on down there. There's a scene in the second Skipp and Spector book called The Cleanup. There's this scene where the main character sees a woman crying under the elevated train tracks down in that area, and it's a transsexual hooker who stabs him repeatedly. Yeah, I mean, that was my first experience with transsexual hookers with knives. It's a great time.
But I remember, like, now that, the whole gender fluid, it's a whole different culture. But I remember, like, you don't fuck with a tranny, because the tranny hookers, like, they'd been through everything. They would fucking kill you. Like,
oh, yeah.
They were tough motherfuckers.
They were so tough. And yeah, again, I mean, it's like, the great thing about New York City at that time, I felt, was that it had a life raft mentality. Like, we all know that we're on this raft and it could go over at any time, so we're all a bunch of bastards and we're all very willful and stuff, but there was that kind of, I'll watch out, I know we're in this together.
Absolutely.
Sort of thing. And then to be so marginalized as those people, man, I'd be pissed too. I was pissed already, and I wasn't going through like a fraction of the shit they were going through. So,
hey, do you know a writer named Scurvy Bastard?
Great name.
Yeah, he dear friend since like 75.
Wow.
And he was good friends with Steve Dillon and Garth Ennis.
Okay.
And he was hanging out in the Meatpacking District and wasted, and it was snowing, blizzard. And so he and some tranny hooker sort of like, she put him in her coat, and the two of them sort of like went through the blizzard together, like to get to some place. And it was just like, sweetie, and and then they partied, and it was that New York kind of like, we're all in this together.
Yeah. What is the name of the cartoonist? Callahan, the paraplegic cartoonist who draws with one foot. Actually, I think he died a couple years ago, and they made a movie about him with Joaquin Phoenix playing him or something. But anyway, he was a paraplegic. He drew with one foot, and he had this cartoon, The Difference Between New York and Los Angeles. It was two panels, the exact same panel, of two people passing each other on the sidewalk. The New York panel was somebody saying, "Fuck you," but they're thinking, "Have a nice day." The Los Angeles one was somebody saying, "Have a nice day," but they're thinking, "Fuck you."
Absolutely.
It's like, wow.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's absolutely true.
Right?
Yeah.
That was a good cartoon.
Yeah, I remember when I moved to LA, I gave someone the finger driving, which in New York is like good morning. Like,
yes.
Nobody cares. And they almost drove me up the road. And I was like, well, that's weird. Like, they But the cartoon is, that's, exactly. So, any other thing you want to add about Joe, or what you're working on now, or anything?
Well, let's see here.
Do you have a favorite Joe Lansdale story or book?
Well, I mean, the story that he wrote for Book of the Dead, it was very interesting talking with Joe just now on the panel, and he was talking about how Dave Scows' Silver Scream and my Book of the Dead, which I did with Craig Spector, were like the two anthologies that changed everything. And Joe's story in Book of the Dead, On the Far Side of the Cadillac Desert, Dead Folk, so great, man. When the zombies with the Mickey Mouse ears stapled to their heads arrive. No, I mean, there's not a bad second in that story. That story is just like galvanized adrenaline flash from start to finish. I really love the drive-in. The drive-in was the one I felt like it really came together for him as a longer form writer. I am a big fan of what is the name of Freezer Burn, which is a lesser known book that involves carny action and a man who enters the story after robbing and blowing up what was it, like a fireworks stand, is driven into the swamp, stung by a million wasps, comes out looking malformed, and is immediately brought into the circus to be part of the show. That thing is...
I have to reread that.
It is nuts.
Yeah, I have it. I have to reread it. It's been years.
He's always great, but the crazier his shit is, the happier I get. And, nobody does crazy like Joe, and anybody who comes even close is just trying to copy him. So there's that. Now, I haven't read, I just bought today The Bottoms because I haven't read as much of his...
you can't read them as fast as he writes them.
No.
You can't.
No. No. And I got other shit to do. But it was really a pleasure to be able to catch that today, and that's going to be my... That just bumped Blood Meridian off of my reading on the plane list as I go back.
That's a big bump.
Yeah, fuck that guy. I'm reading Joe.
Fuck Mariah Carey.
Yeah, I hear he's very good. He seems nice. But
Joe is as good as, Mark Twain or, Faulkner or any of those really big lit guys. I mean, I would put him in that, right? I mean,
Joe's as good as the game. And one of the things about Joe is whatever he writes, you can pick him out of the lineup. Because the one thing that never varies and never should is that voice. His voice leads that thing, and if you've never heard him read, you may not know it, but the second you hear him read, you can't read anything that he's ever written and not hear him read it to you, and that is a magical thing. He's great. He's as good as the game. I think in terms of writers or any other kind of creative artist, once you reach a certain level of good or a certain level of wow, then there is no better or worser. It comes down to you're one of the top. You're the cream of the fucking crop, baby. So that's how I feel about Joe. That's how I feel about him entirely. And what's really nice, he and I both have episodes in the new show Creep Show.
Oh, I'm so excited about that.
Yeah.
It looks so great. And everybody involved is awesome. There's so many good talented people involved. It's going to be really fucking awesome.
It's going to be really fucking awesome. So I'm very excited about that. I might have been thinking a little bit of him when my friend and I wrote the story, Times is Tough in Muskie Holler. But it's not a Joe pastiche at all. It's just... I think it might crack him up, it's a weirdly political horror story. We managed to sneak some shit in, so that will be really fun. And I can't wait to see David Arquette play the sheriff. That will be super fun.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Do you know who's directing that one? Are they doing different directors like Master of Horror? Or is it one director or?
They have a pocket of directors. I think like 4 or 5. Nicotero, who's running the show, is doing a couple. John Harrison directed ours. He did the soundtrack for the original Creep Show and has since directed like the Tales from the Dark Side film and various other things.
I love that one. That's the one with Debbie Harry, right?
Yeah. He's a cool cat.
That would be great.
Yeah, really excited about that.
And I think like once you know Joe, you're always trying to kind of please Joe. Like, there's something, like, I said, it's weird because, like, he's not only my dad, but there's something about him that makes you want, like, his approval and, like, and I said to him, too, when we first started, I was like, he's like, can we sell out the theater? Because, it's like, and I was like, oh, yeah, no problem, because, I was in the early stages and I was all, like, confident and cocky. And then, we got about halfway through the project, I'm like, oh, fuck, man. And I'm like, Joe, I don't know, like, I said, I don't know if I'm going to sell out. And he's like, even if nobody comes, I'm still proud of you. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And I started crying.
I would like him to be proud of me, but I'm mostly concerned with...
he respects you, clearly.
Good. I just like making him do that goofy grin. You got the best smile. Damn, fucking love that guy.
Yeah.
I don't know what I could add to that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. We got everything we need. That's perfect. And I definitely want to do that piece, the documentary on how Splatterpunk and what happened after. So let's stay in touch and figure out a way to you to participate in that. And Brian Keane said he just wrote a book about that. So
that may well be true. I just interestingly put together a live performance with a PowerPoint presentation with I think was it 365 stills, book covers and authors and historical context and everything about the history of Splatterpunk that I started.
Can we borrow from that?
I'll tell you what. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
That'd be cool. What I want to do is I want to take that on the road as a performance thing.
Okay.
Just to have the screen behind me and everything because
I don't want to jump on your thing then,
Yeah.
But if there's a way after you're done, we could.
Well, I mean, point being, from my end, a certain amount of the research materials have been pulled together, and I would be more than happy to share that stuff with you and just talk about how to do it. I think Joe and I both agree, and Dave Scow would agree, and maybe a handful of others, that this was a important point in horror history and cultural history, and that we were really happy and lucky to be a part of it. And
you created it, man. You guys, you created that moment.
I helped start that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I
Still
remember
is.
reading it. It was like, holy fuck. I can't believe somebody's writing this shit.
It was a dirty job that somebody had to do.
So cool. We should